Galactic Standard Date. Year 11356. Day 96. Sol Standard Date. 4th of the 8th. 3267. Ambassador sighed heavily as he started working on a rift near Sylvan's coordinates, when he felt a familiar energy opening a rift in the planet's orbit. He clenched his fists hard enough that the metal groaned under the stress, and his body started to glow with runic inscriptions. He simultaneously started readying an offensive power while he created the rift. As Sylvan stared into the sky, he noticed a spark of green next to the bodies of the massive Azarians. As soon as he focused in on it, the spark had grown large enough to be seen as a veil rift even from the ground. Soon the eyes of all the ants were glued to the rift. Within moments, tentacles shot out of the rift, then latched onto the body of the massive high priest Alcaresh. As the two halves of the body started getting dragged into the rift, another one opened not far from it. Immediately, green lightning sparked across the sky from the second rift. Sylvan and the ants all felt a primal fear grip their hearts as they heard the thunderclaps from the lightning and the screeching from the stellar winds funneling out of the rift. Then, seemingly, the entire universe went silent for a moment before it trembled with the unbridled rage of a god. Basilisk stepped out of the rift and unleashed a storm of pure veil energies towards the other tentacle-laden rift, and growled out in a booming voice, "Mael! I will end your pitiful fucking life again, and use your skull as a new fucking toilet! I will not spare any one Azarian soul from extermination!" Space warped heavily, as if a black hole had just appeared. Basilisk reached his arms out towards the rift that had pulled in half of Alcaresh, and then there was light. The audience on the ground shuddered as a blinding light enveloped their trembling world. A solid beam of pale green light had lanced out towards the rift with the destructive force of a neutron star at 0.9 C. Mael screamed into the void. "I will eat all of your little friends, and leave you alive to agonize over their loss that you couldn't prevent." The two warlord bodies were abandoned, along with the other half of Alcaresh, as Mael closed the rift on his own limbs, severing a few dozen tentacles that were surely atomized by Basilisk's attack. Having no rift to go through, the beam of light streaked through space towards a gas giant in the Torvaeus system. He facepalmed himself and groaned as he watched the light strike the center of the planet. The gas clouds burned away for hundreds of kilometers, revealing a surface that was crackling with lines of pure green energy. Basilisk quickly formed a shield around the gas giant, pouring in as much energy as he could to strengthen it. Shortly after the shield formed, there was a flash, and the planet shattered in a rippling explosion that was strong enough to affect space-time. The chunks of planet smashed against the shield from every possible point for a few minutes, before he couldn't feel any more impacts on it. So he flew over and lowered the shield. He was immediately battered by intense heat, and he could see an unusually large amount of stellar lightning in the massive cloud of dust and gas. "Well, that's fucking great," he said as he rubbed his temples. "Hopefully they didn't need the fucking planet. Good job me. Holy fucking shit, how did I not think this would happen if I fired at a target that was in another dimension? Fuck. I'm glad I wasn't pointing at the wrong planet. What are the chances that the angle would line perfectly for that horseshit too? Fuck. Guess I better go apologize." Amaranth flew off to the side of him for a moment, staring into the massive stellar cloud that resembled a mini nebula. "Don't worry about it, Bassie. It was just a gas planet. They won't even care." With a weary sigh, he looked over at Amaranth and shook his head. "Even if they don't care, I'm beating myself up on principle. I should let my rage take over every time I see Henty Tenty and his meandering of fucked up Cthulhus. I literally have the power to accidentally wipe this universe from existence. I cannot let my emotions take control." Amaranth's face softened a bit at that, as she shrugged her shoulders before indicating that they should get a move on to Antland. The pair flew towards the planet, and Basilisk stopped next to the massive corpses of the Azarian warlords, along with what was left of Alcaresh. He lazily waved his hand across the bodies. Nothing seemed to happen from start to finish until he brought his fingers together and snapped. The Azarian bodies exploded down to chunks that were small enough that they should burn up in the atmosphere, and then he turned his gaze towards the moon. It was just starting to get low enough to cause problems, so Basilisk quickly began to form energy around his left arm. His arm started to glow brightly with pure veil energy. The energy began expanding while retaining his arm's shape, until it was big enough to get a sizable dissipation of force before he tried to pull it out of the planet's atmosphere. He reached underneath the moon and slowly started to apply force. His ghostly hand began to dig deep trenches into the moon as he slowed his descent. He held it, suspended in the air for a moment, as he started to pull it back into the outer orbit. It took him a total of 5 minutes to stop the moon from impacting and stabilize his orbit. The veil arm dissipated, leaving wisps of energy trailing across the moon as they created small electrical discharges in the hand-shaped crater. He turned his gaze towards Sylvan's position and started flying down. He quickly came within view of the massive landing pad, and was greeted by a sight that he's grown all too accustomed to. Over 1,000 ants were bowing towards him. Everywhere he looked within the city, there were ants bowing in his direction. He sighed and floated down to the crowd before speaking. Hey, sorry about your planet. I accidentally blew up your gas giant. I contained the explosion though, so it will form a new planet in a few million or billion years. Unless you decide to harvest it now, this is easier. Moon's back where it's supposed to go though, so there's that. Although I also damaged that, as you can probably see from here. Also, there is no need for bowing. Not really a fan, he said, as he stared awkwardly at the crowd. Sorry.